All right, let's dive right in. We're heading back to the early 19th century in America, a time that was, well, it was absolutely revolutionary. We're talking about a period where brand new ideas about society, about nature, and about who we are as individuals just completely changed the game.
So, try to picture it. You're living in the 1830s, maybe the 1840s. There's this energy in the air, right? It's just electric with the feeling that things are about to change. I mean, even kids were picking up on it. The children of one legal reformer actually wrote in their own little newspaper that it felt like the whole country was demanding a makeover. This wasn't some small group of people, you know? This was a national mood.
Okay, so let's start by looking at this incredible spirit of reform. What was driving it? Well, it was a mix of things. You had this new democratic energy bubbling up, plus a big wave of religious optimism. And the result? Thousands of everyday Americans suddenly got this idea in their heads that they could do more than just improve their own lives. They believed they could actually perfect society itself. Talk about ambition. And when I say this desire for change was everywhere, I mean everywhere. It wasn't just one group. You had laborers demanding better schools for their kids, merchants were focused on tariffs, lawyers wanted to rewrite the laws, abolitionists were, of course, fighting against slavery, and women were starting to demand more legal rights. It really felt like every single person you met had something they were passionate about fixing. What's really fascinating here is watching how the movement grew up. It came in two waves. The first one, back in the 1820s, was, let's say, a bit more traditional. It was all about promoting morality, getting people to stop drinking so much, go to church, that kind of thing. But then, in the 30s and 40s, this second wave hits, and it is so much more radical. These folks weren't just trying to make society more moral, they wanted to liberate people from tradition altogether. They were pushing for crazy ideas for the time, like freeing all the slaves, right now, and complete equality between men and women.
So, what's fueling this huge radical shift? Well, it's this powerful new idea taking hold: individualism. You have to remember, America was expanding like crazy. The economy was growing, and all that change started to weaken the old social glue. Things like your family ties, your local community, your social class. Suddenly, people were more on their own than ever before. And that, right there, sparked a whole new way of thinking about what it means to be an individual.
It's funny. The guy who actually came up with the word individualism was a French aristocrat, Alexis de Tocqueville. And he was pretty worried about it. To him, it looked like this dangerous kind of social isolation with everyone just drifting apart. But Americans, no, they saw it completely differently. For them, this wasn't some terrible loss, this was liberation. And if this new idea of individualism had a champion, a real superstar, it was Ralph Waldo Emerson. He was this brilliant philosopher and writer. And he looked at the breakdown of old social ties and didn't see a problem at all. He celebrated it. He was all about the freedom of the individual. And believe me, his way of thinking is going to define this entire era. So, okay, how exactly did Emerson make the case for the individual? What was his big idea? Well, he became the leading voice of this whole new intellectual movement called Transcendentalism. It was a philosophy all about exploring what he called the infinitude of the private man, basically, the limitless potential inside every single person. And this was a huge break from the past. For a long time, the big thing was the Enlightenment, all about logic and reason. Transcendentalism said, not so much. It leaned more into this European movement called Romanticism. The core idea was pretty simple but radical. You don't need a priest or a book to tell you what's true. You could just trust your gut, your intuition, and connect directly with God and with nature all on your own. Emerson's message was really a call to action. He wanted people to become, as he put it, remakers. He thought everyone was trapped in this faded masquerade of old, hand-me-down ideas. So what was the solution? Simple. Question everything. Shed those old ideas. Get yourself out into nature, by yourself, and forge your own brand new relationship with the universe. I don't think this was just some dusty idea for a few intellectuals in a university. No way. Emerson was basically a rock star of his day. He was part of this thing called the Lyceum movement, which was like a national lecture circuit. And get this, he gave 1,500 lectures in 20 different states. He was taking this message of self-reliance and spreading it directly to the American middle class. It was huge. So as you can imagine, the impact of these ideas was explosive, especially when it came to American literature. Emerson was basically calling for writers to stop copying Europeans and find their own, uniquely American voice. And that call sparked this incredible creative firestorm we now call the American Renaissance. It lit a fire under a whole generation of writers, some of the most famous names you can think of.
Let's start with Henry David Thoreau. Now, this guy, he wasn't just going to talk the talk. He decided to walk the walk. He was a follower of Emerson, and after a personal tragedy, he decided he was going to put this whole philosophy of self-reliance to the ultimate test. So what did he do? He went out to Walden Pond, built himself a tiny cabin, and lived there, alone, for 2 years. And the book he wrote about it, Walden, became the manifesto for transcendentalism. It's where we get all those famous lines about living deliberately and marching to the beat of your own drummer. It's about breaking away from the herd and finding your own path.
Okay, next up we've got the incredible Margaret Fuller. She heard these transcendentalist ideas and made this brilliant logical leap. She said, okay, wait a minute. If every individual has this inner spark, this direct line to the divine, then that has to include women, right? And if that's true, she argued, then every woman deserves total and complete independence. Her book, Woman in the 19th Century, was an absolute bombshell. She wasn't just asking for a few small changes. She demanded that every arbitrary barrier be torn down. She wanted women to have the exact same psychological and social freedom as men. You have to understand, for that time, this was an unbelievably radical thing to say. And then there was Walt Whitman. I love how he described it. He said he'd been simmering, just waiting for something. And then he read Emerson's essays, and they brought me to a boil. That was it. He knew what he had to do. He was going to be the poet of this new America, the poet of the individual. And his masterpiece, Leaves of Grass, is just breathtaking. He takes that divine spark that Emerson saw in one person and he expands it to cover everybody. He starts by saying, I celebrate myself and sing myself. But then he immediately adds that every part of him belongs to you too. He's celebrating himself, sure, but he's also celebrating all of us, the whole messy, beautiful American democracy, saying that the whole thing is sacred. But here's the thing, not everyone was drinking the Kool-Aid. Not everyone shared this wild optimism. Some of the other great writers of the time looked at this new, free-floating individual, and they didn't see godlike potential. They saw danger. They had a much, much darker vision of where all this could lead. And this really gets to the heart of the debate, right? It's like two sides of a coin. On one side, you've got Emerson saying, the individual is divine, free yourself from tradition. But on the other side, you have guys like Herman Melville who are saying, whoa, hold on, an individual without any rules, any inner discipline, that person could spiral into a crazy, destructive obsession. And they wrote some classic cautionary tales to prove their point. Think about Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Scarlet Letter. The characters break society's rules, but they don't find liberation. They find guilt and misery. Or even better, think about Moby Dick. Captain Ahab is the ultimate individual on an obsessive quest. And where does it lead him? Not to transcendence. It leads to death and destruction for him and pretty much everyone around him. It's the ultimate warning about individualism running wild. Which brings us right back to today, doesn't it? This whole debate they were having almost 200 years ago, I mean, it feels more relevant than ever. We live in this age of social media, personal branding, and deep political divides. So the question for us is the same as it was for them. How do we find that balance? How do we champion the power of the individual, which is so important, without losing the things we need as a society to stick together? It's a tough one. Definitely something to chew on.